Greetings and salutations. It is I, Professor Macabro, here for another movie review. Yes, indeed, I am here to regale you with a movie review of a movie that I have seen for the first time or have recently revisited and give you my thoughts on it indeed. Ha ha ha. I wanted to deviate a little bit from horror. Ah, blasphemy! I know. I love horror to death, as the content of my channel clearly shows. But sometimes you want to take a little dip into different waters. See what's going on over there and check around and see what you find. And I was in the mood to see some different movies. I started with Drop Dead Gorgeous, which is a comedy thriller. It says online, even though it's more of a comedy, but it does have a body count. Battlefield Earth, a disaster movie that was a disaster and made not a lick of sense. So those kind of, I'm justifying as a little bit of horror movies. But the last one that I wanted to see has nothing to do with horror. Not a damn thing. I was in an episode of Psychobabble, and we were talking about nudity in movies. And I brought up Under Siege. Yes, indeed, because that one had a very, very memorable scene, let me tell you. I've never wanted cake so bad in my life. So I decided to revisit that movie and watch it this weekend. And watch it I did. And that is the classic. I'm going to go with classic. Under Siege. Now, you might be, Professor Macabro, this thing's still sealed. How did you watch it? Professor Macabro is an insane madman. And whenever he can, he likes to keep the plastic of his DVDs. They work very well to keep the dust away, you see. So very, very carefully, I took it out of its plastic sleeve, washed it, and then very carefully put it back in. Unfortunately, it has a lot of tears because I've taken this movie out of the plastic a number of times. But yes, it's one of those little quirks that make Professor Macabro what he is, indeed. But yes, Under Siege, another one of these movies that is in a snapper case. Yes, these very delicate but very fun to collect movie formats. A little bit of history. Back when DVDs first released, they came out in these jewel cases. They were clear plastic releases, and then they released the snapper cases, which were very popular, but these things, if you got it wet, well, that ruined the case. And they were also very prone to get crushed, you see. So they eventually released the plastic cases later on. But snapper cases are very, very sought after by collectors. So yes, I like getting snapper cases whenever I can. Under Siege, what is this movie about? Well, first we have to delve into the madness that is Steven Seagal. Steven Seagal came out with as an action star, and he came out with some very successful movies. Hard to Kill, Out for Justice, and they were very popular. A lot of people questioned his martial arts style, and it seems that his fame got really quick to boost his ego, because there are stories of how egomaniac Steven Seagal eventually became. And honestly, after Under Siege, the quality of his movies weren't that good. If memory serves me right, the movie he did after this was On Deadly Ground, which was a movie that he wanted to do and had this whole environmental, political message, and it wasn't that good. And after that, it's just gotten worse. And eventually, of course, Steven Seagal got to the point where he got kind of chunky, and he couldn't do his martial arts anymore. So you would have him sit in a dark room so you wouldn't see his chin fat and the rest of his fat. It's not body shaming, but he really let himself go. And there are even some more recent movies that are just appalling with the amount of body double that represents Seagal, and even voice doubles. I mean, the guy doesn't even do his own voiceovers. For shame. But I don't know what's worse, the fact that that's his case, or the fact that I own so many Steven Seagal movies. Who's really the worst of there? But not focusing on that. Focusing on Under Siege. Under Siege, unfortunately, also follows a plot point that is very popular in Steven Seagal movies, where Steven Seagal plays a cook in a battleship that's about to be decommissioned and the nuclear warheads retired. And turns out that this lowly cook is some sort of super elite military guy that no one knew he was super elite because his files were encrypted. But he's the best of the best of the best, and there's no one that can touch him in your whole goddamn army. He's just too overpowered. And that's something that does repeat itself a lot in Steven Seagal movies, that they take him for granted and it turns out like he's this super elite badass. Again, really bolstering his ego, which I can respect because I'm an egomaniac too, but come on, man. Be reasonable. I mean, I'm a fictional character. When people see me wielding 2 Infinity Gauntlets, it's par for the course for this guy. But when Steven Seagal comes out all fat and flabby and is like, oh man, this guy has a kill count of 1 million people, you tend not to buy it that much. But that's in the future. This hasn't reached that point yet. So Steven Seagal is this cook, and they're throwing a birthday party for the captain, because it's his birthday, and again, it's a double whammy of giving a farewell to this battleship, and also the captain's birthday present. So they hire a band, and they hire this Playboy playmate to do her thing for the boys, and you're expecting that. And she's played out very bad with names, you see, but she's played by one of the blonde chicks that was in Baywatch, and she was very young in that, and she grew, let me tell you. She grew very nicely. So, it turns out that the band is working with the first officer to take over the ship and sell off the nukes to the Russians or the Chinese, what have you. And they lock up the cook, thinking that he's a fucking cook. He has an attitude, but it's a fucking cook. And it turns out that the fucking cook is like, this double super secret black ops motherfucker that, again, there's no one that can touch him in your whole goddamn army. So he's beating people up. He's doing his hand-to-hand combat thing, which at this point, I must admit, was kind of getting tired. I mean, the way that he does the martial art things, at this point, was starting to be not that believable. I mean, at least Van Damme did his splits. And, Arnold Schwarzenegger was a big burly motherfucker, and Stallone was Sylvester Stallone. But Steven Seagal started good, but then he started going way, way down in the echelon of action stars. Anyway, the scene in this movie that's the most memorable for a very young Professor Macabro, even a very old Professor Macabro, is after all the crew members are locked away under the ship, and the terrorists have this thing willfully and totally taken over. Steven Seagal escapes, gears up, and is walking through the kitchen. And he sees the cake, and he's like, the fuck is that? And then the music hits, and out comes the chick from Baywatch, and in a like a sea captain suit with her little hat and her little jacket, and she's like, boom, 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 flashes, boom, and you're like, oh my god, that's freaking perfect. You just can't keep away from watching it. It's like, holy shit, it is very brief, but very memorable for Professor Macabro. My love for the booba is known throughout the land, you see, so when a scene like that pops up, you bet your ass I'm gonna remember it. And again, they're a good pair. Indeed. But very brief. She's like doing her thing, flashing, taking the jacket off, then sees Steven Seagal, and she's like, holy shit, a motherfucker with a gun. What the fuck's going on here? And eventually the chick helps Steven Seagal against the terrorist, and she becomes a hero in her own right. But I remember seeing this movie on TV, you see. And I was like, again, I was very young at the time. So I'm watching this movie on TV. That's that movie I rented on VHS. And that scene is going to come up. Oh, yeah. And, of course, because it was TV, I guess my idiot young mind didn't quite grasp the concept of TV edits. When that scene pops up, she comes out of the cake, she takes off the hat, she's about to do, and then it cuts to her being like, well, what the fuck? A motherfucker with a gun, what's going on here? And I'm like, where are the boobs? The fuck happened to the boobs? The boobs weren't there. Then, of course, it's like TV edit, so of course they weren't going to show any nudity. But I felt robbed because of that. Very robbed. So I went out and I rented the VHS just because I was denied that scene. Those are the lengths that Professor Macabre went back in the day. Indeed. But a very good action movie in its own right. It has Tommy Lee Jones as the main bad guy. But again, you see Tommy Lee Jones. No offense to Tommy Lee Jones. He's a badass in his own right. But then you see Steven Seagal, it's like, well, Tommy Lee Jones is going to get pwned. Pwned by Steven Seagal, and he does. But Gary Busey is also in this as the mentally unstable first officer, and, well, I guess he played to his strengths, because he actually was kind of mentally unstable at this point. But everything comes together in a very nice action movie. Again, the only thing that, at this point, for me, kind of got a little tired is the whole Steven Seagal, next snap, next snap, next snap. I'm like, don't you have anything else on your repertoire? Which, of course, it turns out, no, he doesn't. He doesn't have anything else in his repertoire. That's his thing, and by God, he stuck to it. But this movie in particular was a lot of fun to revisit. Good action, for what it is. That memorable cake scene, which again alone gives it 10 points in my book. And interesting characters and interesting story at the time again. So highly recommend you give Under Siege a watch. But track down the complete edition with that cake scene. You'll thank me later, I guarantee it. Yes, indeed. Good movie. I thoroughly enjoyed that. So, that was the Under Siege review and the last movie that I saw in this recent movie marathon. Let me know what you think of Under Siege. Do you still enjoy Steven Seagal, despite the fact that you don't really see him that often in his movies? It's only him in a very tight close-up in a darkened room, so you don't see his fatness. And then you have numerous body doubles doing the action scenes and also doing the voice work because the fucking guy's so lazy doesn't do his own voice work. Come on, man! Let me know in the comments down below. But until we see you again next time, this has been Professor Macabre and my lovely gal pal Zombie Wesitos, thanking you for watching and supporting the channel, and wishing you, like always, a good evening.